It almost feels like school all over again. Today's the last day, and of course, they're going to ring the bell and go home early, but not without a lot of controversy. First of all, Justin Trudeau decided to skip out on his last day. He announced that yesterday, or his staff announced that yesterday. We have not heard Justin Trudeau address anything that happened in the past 24, 48 hours. In fact, if you watched the sequence of what happened yesterday, the events in order, which is the previous video that I posted earlier this morning on this channel, you'll see, which I highly recommend you guys go and watch that because it lays down everything from start to finish, what happened. He ended the day by going to a charity event for the Liberals to raise more money. And then after, like late last night, Justin Trudeau spoke at that charity event and said, we need to focus on raising more money because we need to fight Pierre poilievre because he also raised a lot of money. Didn't address anything about Freeland, nothing about his cabinet imploding, nothing about the worst political day in Canadian history. And so here we are left without any questions, which isn't that abnormal in Canada. Like, the question period is supposed to be questions and answers, but we always get questions without answers. So we're kind of desensitized to it a little bit, even though I like to get some answers at some point about literally anything. But here we are, the last day, twiddling our thumbs going, what the fuck is going on in Canada? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you all to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. It does really help with its growth. We're going to be taking a look at what's going on. I maybe got a couple news stories if I can fit them in. We're going to take a look at what happens in Parliament today during question period, the last day. It's always very rowdy. So sit back, relax, and let's get through this video in this day together. Oral questions. Questions on Honorable Leader of the Opposition, soon to be next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre poilievre. Andrew Scheer.
It was a gong show at the bottom of a dumpster fire, wrapped up in a cluster. The finance minister resigns, the prime minister hides all day and then has to beg his MPs not to fire him. But the worst news, buried underneath it all, was a devastating gut punch to Canadian taxpayers. A $62 billion deficit smashing through the already insane $40 billion guardrail. Canada is a serious G7 NATO partner staring down the threat of 25% tariffs. We deserve a strong leader with a new mandate. Why not let Canadians decide by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I want to start by thanking the Opposition House Leader for his heartfelt congratulations on my new role. I want to tell him, Mr. Speaker, and all Canadians, that our government is very proud of the fall economic statement that we made public yesterday. Mr. Speaker, the fall economic statement speaks to growth in the Canadian economy. It speaks to supporting Canadians with serious affordability challenges. It speaks to a declining debt to GDP ratio, the best in the G7. And Mr. Speaker, we haven't finished supporting Canadians, something the Conservatives aren't interested in doing.
That is Trudeau's old babysitter, ladies and gentlemen.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Well, I'd like to congratulate the new finance minister for being the fourth finance minister in a 24-hour period. But it's the same old talking points. What they did yesterday was smash through that $40 billion guardrail. What does that mean? It now means that Canadians have to pay back all that money with interest, and 43 cents of every dollar you earn now has to go to pay the tax burden. More money to bankers and bondholders. In fact, the government's now spending more on the interest on that debt than on health care. But the Prime Minister doesn't care. He doesn't worry about where the money comes from. He's never had to worry about that. So why not let Canadians decide their future by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect their government to be focused on their economic concerns. They expect their government to be focused on the real threat that 25% tariffs across the board would mean to the Canadian economy. That's the work that our government's doing. I can report, Mr. Speaker, I had an encouraging preliminary conversation with the Foreign Affairs Minister yesterday, with the Border Czar, with Mr. Holman. We look forward to working with the incoming administration on border security, something that the fall economic statement generously supported yesterday. And this is the work Canadians expect us to be focused on, and we're looking forward to doing that work.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
Yeah, they were so proud of that fall budget that they tabled it in the House and then ran and hid for the rest of the day. But let's recap. The Prime Minister announced $250 checks and then had to cancel them. He announced a 2-month GST tax trick that businesses say they won't implement, and the Prime Minister now says is optional. A broken immigration system, Parliament seized with a $400 million corruption scandal, all the while 2 million food bank visits, doubled housing costs, record high consumer debt, the dollar below 70 cents, and the Prime Minister raising prices by quadrupling the carbon tax. Yes. Again, why not let Canadians decide their future by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and for Intergovernmental Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, as I said a moment ago, we're proud of the fiscal and economic record of this government. This is a record, Mr. Speaker, of supporting Canadians through the pandemic. This is a record of investing in entrepreneurship and innovation. This is a record in providing, for example, Canadians with $10 a day childcare, historic investments to speak to not only affordability issues, but growing the economy in a sustainable way. Mr. Speaker, this is work we're proud to continue to do for Canadians, and we find it unfortunate that it's the opposition that's trying to ground this House of Commons into chaos.
That's right. Hear, hear.
No right to be angry. We've got a Prime Minister who's more interested in protecting his own job.
Shut the hell up, Jagmeet.
Against a threat.
I'm going to ask the honourable members, in particular the honourable member from Miramichi Grand Lake and the member from Dufferin Caledon, please, to not take their voices. I'm going to invite the honourable member from Burnaby South to start his question again.
People are right to be angry. They've got a Prime Minister who's more interested in protecting his own job than defending Canadians against Trump.
I hate this guy.
He's failed
Give me a
to
break.
defend workers from rich CEOs like the Conservatives love, who continue to rip off Canadians and drive up the cost of food and homes. The Prime Minister has failed. For New Democrats, it's always workers first and not CEOs. And not CEOs who the Conservatives want to defend. So will the Prime Minister acknowledge he has failed? He has to quit.
Order, please. The honourable minister, and leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this House voted in confidence of this government just last week on multiple occasions. Mr. Speaker, we have important work to do on behalf of Canadians. We have a very important relationship to manage with the United States at a pivotal time, Mr. Speaker, and that is exactly what this government is focused on doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On protecting CEOs to the harm of workers. The
Prime Minister is working harder to defend his own job than to defend Canadians from Donald Trump's threats. The Prime Minister failed to defend workers from CEOs who are taking all the money. This Prime Minister needs to protect workers, not CEOs. The Prime Minister has failed. Will he resign? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the NDP leader knows full well that last week we earned the confidence of this House on several occasions. Our government always works to protect Canadians, Canadian jobs, and the Canadian economy. Now, we're focused on that. And we are focused on properly managing our relations with the United States.
Yesterday, the fall economic statement confirmed what former finance minister, the budget officer, and the Globe and Mail already told us, that this weak and now wounded Prime Minister hijacked the statement to drive Canada through the fiscal guardrail and over a cliff. $62 billion in overspending. That's 50% higher than their own target set just months ago. They told us over and over again that the deficit wouldn't exceed $40 billion. Simple question. Why did they mislead Canadians again?
Yeah, way to go, Melissa.
There you go. Put some W's down for Melissa.
And for Intergovernmental Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, far from misleading Canadians, the government thinks it's important to be transparent in terms of the fiscal picture of the government. That's why, Mr. Speaker, based on legal advice and accounting practices, the government booked contingent liabilities that increase the initial deficit projection to the level that my colleague referred to. Mr. Speaker, this is about righting historical wrongs with Indigenous peoples, something the previous government, Conservative government, ignored. And Mr. Speaker, we think the responsible thing to do is to be transparent with Canadians. That's exactly what we did.
That's right.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, of the Liberal ministers that still remain, not a single one would stick around yesterday to even defend the statement. They dropped it here and then ran out the door. $62 billion of new debt and new inflationary spending for Canadians to pay on their grocery bills, on their home heating, and on everything else. That's equivalent to spending $1 every second for nearly 2,000 years. The Prime Minister has clearly lost control of his caucus. He's lost control of his cabinet. He's now lost control of spending. So when will he give Canadians the chance to weigh in and call a carbon tax election?
That's all we want. That's all. Oh, here goes champagne. Finance Minister for 5 minutes.
No lessons to learn from the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. On the eve of Christmas, what we presented to Canadians, Mr. Speaker, it's no time for slogan. It's no time for smiles, Mr. Speaker. This is time for us to be serious. What the Minister of Finance presented yesterday was a fall economic statement which is focused on growth, investment in our workers, investment in our industry, and investment in Canada. Mr. Speaker, you know what? Because confident country invest in themselves, something that the Conservative could not understand. We'll stand for Canadians. We'll stand for Canada on this side of the House.
That side of the House is looking pretty slim pickings.
Mr. Speaker, who is in charge of the clattering train? The Prime Minister has lost the confidence of Canadians, and now he's lost the confidence of his MPs and his cabinet. He's focused not on Canadians, but on himself as he clings to power. Yesterday, the government posted a $62 billion deficit blowing through the guardrails. The government is careening out of control. Things are in complete chaos. When will we get an election?
Yeah. That's all we want.
The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what the Conservative opposition is doing is they are focused on us while we are focused on Canadians, Mr. Speaker. We are focused on ensuring that we are delivering affordability measures for Canadians at a difficult time. We are focused on ensuring that we have a strong relationship with our most important trading partner, the United States. That is what this government is squarely focused on, Canadians, protecting the Canadian economy and protecting Canadian jobs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, not only did the statement post a $62 billion deficit, it revised 2025 growth down and it revised 2025 unemployment up. The Prime Minister has failed to recognize the gravity of the moment. He's focused not on Canadians, but on himself. His government is in utter and complete chaos. So when will the Prime Minister realize that the end is here, that his government and this Parliament is dead, and call an election?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, we have the lowest debt and deficit in the G7, Mr. Speaker, and in addition, in the fall economic statement, Canadians can see supports for affordable housing, supports for $10 a day childcare, supports for public servants who want early retirement, Mr. Speaker, because on this side of the House, what do? We support Canadians as opposed to what they do, which is cut, cut, cut.
Shut up. Shut up. Shut up.
The Prime
Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his caucus, of his cabinet, and of Canadians. The Deputy Prime Minister resigned because the Prime Minister said that he had lost confidence in her. A minister must speak on behalf of the Prime Minister.
That's quite the sparkle outfit, eh?
In making your decision, you made clear, I no longer credibly enjoy that confidence. Just last week, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was talking about how Americans have lost the ability for females to lead in that country. But the Prime Minister only uses females when it's useful for him. Isn't that right, Mr. Speaker?
Woo! Calls himself a feminist. Turns out he's a misogynist.
Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
No.
Honourable Member for...
She said no.
Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his cabinet, of his caucus, and Canadians. He blew through the $61.9 billion deficit over the $40 billion guardrails that he had set. The Finance Minister, she tried to warn him, and he fired her for trying to warn him. He offered her another position, and she refused. Why is it that this Prime Minister only has confidence in women until they question him? Exactly.
She's going off today.
Women and gender equality.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives keep bandying about the word feminism, but let's talk about tangible policies that are offered in the fall economic statement for women. $50 million to build more shelter spaces across this country, Mr. Speaker. $15 million for women's organizations whose goal it is to end gender-based violence, as well as permanent funding for the Sexual and Reproductive Health Fund. This is what it looks like to have the backs of women. Conservatives know nothing about that.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
This Prime Minister has lost confidence of his cabinet, of his Liberal MPs, of Canadians as he clings to power. Hours before she was set to release the fall economic statement, the former Finance Minister quit, saying, quote, "On Friday you told me you no longer want me to serve as your Finance Minister and offered me another position in cabinet," unquote. The fake feminist Prime Minister and the conflict of interest carbon tax carney forced the former Finance Minister to blow through the $40 billion guardrail with a massively irresponsible $62 billion deficit, making her take the blame. Will this fake feminist Prime Minister take responsibility for his economic vandalism and call it an election?
That would be the smart thing to do.
Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
Peel off the Band-Aid.
Mr. Speaker, if Conservatives want to talk about feminism, then let's look at some facts. Let's look at some policies that actually support women across this country. Policies like $10 a day childcare. Policies like the National Action Plan to end
Does that only help women?
Violence, which was actually supported in our latest economic statement, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives, by the way, opposed every single one of these measures. On this side of the House, we will always support women. Who knows what's going on over there?
Bravo. That was a little sexist of her to say that.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, this Prime Minister has lost confidence of his cabinet, his Liberal MPs and Canadians as he clings to power. The former Finance Minister said, quote, "To be effective, a minister must speak on behalf of the Prime Minister and with his full confidence. In making your decision, you made clear that I no longer credibly enjoy that confidence and possess the authority that comes with it." It is clear that this fake feminist Prime Minister threw the former Finance Minister under the bus, just as he did with other women who previously stood up to him. Will this fake feminist Prime Minister take responsibility for his economic vandalism and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are distracting from the fact that the Bank of Canada has cut interest rates 5 times down to 3.25%. Yesterday, our government published the fall economic statement, and I'm happy to share, Mr. Speaker, that it is an investment of $189 million into the Black Entrepreneurship Program that has already helped 16,000 Black entrepreneurs across this country. We are going to be investing in digital adoption for small and medium-sized enterprises of $500 million. We're going to reduce red tape. And, Mr. Speaker, while we're shopping during the GST holiday, let's support local. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has lost confidence of his cabinet, his caucus, and all Canadians as he desperately clings to power. Yesterday, the Liberals dropped their fall economic statement and literally ran out of the House. A $62 billion deficit, missing their target by a whopping 55%. The end result? Canadians are now paying more on debt interest charges than on health care. When will this Prime Minister end the misery, call a carbon tax election so Conservatives can finally fix what they have broken?
The Honourable Uncle Brock does not disappoint.
And Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I want to take the opportunity to inform the Justice critic that, in fact, in that fall economic statement, he would have seen a series of measures that address community safety in our communities across the country. He would have seen measures that crack down on auto theft. He would have seen stricter bail and sentencing provisions. He would have seen provisions in the sex offender registries to get tough on child sex predators. He would have seen securing our borders to provide confidence to our American counterparts, cracking down on money laundering and terrorist financing. These are all measures that we all have an interest in promoting, passing, and getting funded in this country to keep Canadians safe.
The Honourable Member for Brantford-Brant.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister's economic vandalism and inflationary spending, he has added more to the debt than all previous Prime Ministers combined. Now Canadians are paying more. Our national debt now sits at $1.24 trillion, an astronomical number that our future generations will have to deal with. Canada's promise of powerful paychecks, affordable housing, safe streets have all been shattered under the NDP Liberals. This Prime Minister has lost confidence of his caucus, the House, and Canadians. When will he call an immediate carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, that member is a former Crown attorney. He knows in terms of keeping communities safe, it starts with addressing the prolific amount of guns that are in our communities. What's in that fall economic statement? $597 million to take weapons off of our streets. What else is in there? Mr. Speaker, that member knows that organized criminality is a problem in Canada from coast to coast to coast. What we are doing with organized criminality is ensuring tougher penalties for financial crimes, cracking down on money laundering, and cracking down on terrorist financing. You get at the cause of the problem when you address the money flow. That's what we're doing in the fall economic statement. We wish we could have their support.
This week, Liberal Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his cabinet, of his Liberal MPs, and of Canadians, but he still clings to power. And yesterday, the economic statement from his phantom finance minister, Carbon Tax Carney, posted a $62 billion deficit, which is absolutely devastating for Canadians. And they tried to pin it on the finance minister, and she quit in protest. Canadians have had enough of these dirty Liberal backroom deals where Carbon Tax Carney gets all of the power but has none of the accountability. When will these Liberals call a carbon tax election? Because Canadians just can't trust them.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, rather than talking down Canada, let's stress the facts. Inflation has come down to 1.9%, Mr. Speaker. We have the
damage has been done, lady.
lowest deficit in the G7. In the fall economic statement, we put forward numerous measures to support businesses and families in Canada, including $10 a day childcare, which is going to give rise to 300,000 jobs, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we believe in supporting Canadians while maintaining a prudent fiscal outlook, something the Conservatives could never claim to do. Vive le Canada!
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Just like the 9 years of failures of this NDP Liberal government,
here comes the reality
have lost confidence in this Prime Minister, and they showed it last night with the overwhelming majority election of Tamara Jansen in Cloverdale, Langley City.
Yeah, Conservatives won a massive by-election.
Finance Minister posted a $62 billion devastating deficit that Canadians are going to be paying for generations. These Liberals have absolutely lost control, and this flailing Prime Minister doesn't have the confidence of his cabinet, of his caucus, of Canadians. When's he going to call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the fall economic statement yesterday,
oh my goodness. Stop muting the mic. Come on. Let them debate. It's the last day, for crying out loud. Look at two grown men in robes talking to each other.
Made a very specific point.
Oh my goodness. This is why I started a petition.
Order.
Link down below in the description. StopMutingTheMic.ca.
I remember it.
It's important for all members to ensure that they, especially male members, there are particular rules in terms of dress that is in this place. I am not certain that the sweater is a trop, but I'll invite the Honourable Minister perhaps to button up his jacket.
They're trying to get somebody to button up their jacket.
Speaker, we actually celebrate the 100th Canada Forest Service, which is something that I think all parliamentarians should be able to support. Mr. Speaker, in the fall economic statement, we're investing tax credits related to electricity production. It is part of building an economy for the future that will create jobs and economic prosperity across this country. It will ensure affordability for consumers. It will ensure reliability of the grid. And today, I am very pleased to say we are launching Canada's first clean electricity strategy across the country and the clean electricity regulations. It is an important for Canada.
They're calling him fat because he can't button up his jacket.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Hills.
The Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his cabinet, his Liberal MPs, and Canadians as he is desperately clinging to power. He forced the Finance Minister to join the ghosts of ministers past in favor of Finance Minister Carbon Tax Carney because they thought that her massive deficit wasn't big enough. With all the chaos he has caused around him, the Prime Minister's own inner circle is abandoning him. He went to the Governor General yesterday to appoint Carney's placeholder, but why didn't he go one step further and just call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Mr. Speaker, another element of the fall economic statement yesterday was the launch of the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program. That will make Indigenous peoples partners in projects across this country. It is part of building an economy that is inclusive and prosperous on a go-forward basis. On the other side of the House, we have a group that actually are a bunch of climate skeptics and climate deniers who have a plan for the economy that is based on the 1960s and looking backwards. On this side of the House, we are building a future for Canadians.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I recommend you guys hit the like button on the channel because it helps more people see it, and then subscribe to this channel and turn post notifications on so you can actually be notified of upcoming videos and get the relevant news in a very fast fashion. I look forward to seeing you guys later on for maybe an evening video. And yeah, thank you so much for participating in this season of politics. Things are probably going to slow down a little bit until sometime at the end of January. But again, don't go too far away from this channel or your favorite political channels because you never know what can happen. Bye for now.